Hey folks, this is Kalani. One of the largest changes coming with the Dragonflight expansion is the huge profession overhaul. Professions have never been given this much attention, so I figured it would be fun to go through every available profession recipe and see which professions stand out, who has the most interesting or the most powerful crafting options, and what exactly do these things do. We have massive explosives, profession-specific bonuses, new ways to gather materials, and even ways to help other professions master their craft. Now before we jump in, be sure to hit up that like button and subscribe so you never miss another video. For the most part, we're gonna skip over the usual stuff. Blacksmiths make armor and weapons as per usual, leatherworkers make leather and mail gear, and jewelcrafters make gems. We know all of that, and it's not altogether too interesting, so what we're gonna focus on in this video is the weird stuff, the extra stuff, where these professions potentially really shine through, and what might influence your personal profession choice when Dragonflight goes live. We'll go through them in alphabetical order, so I'll make sure to have timestamps so you can skip around to your heart's content. Let's kick things off with Alchemy. As you might expect, Alchemy will be making all sorts of potions. Interestingly, in Dragonflight, we don't have flasks. They've been renamed to vials. So when you see vials, that's more or less a flask this time around. So lots of different potions and vials with a wide variety of effects. But the first really interesting change for Alchemy is for cauldrons. We will see cauldrons in Dragonflight, but instead of providing the vials or flasks for your group to use, they're actually going to provide stacks of potions instead. The potion provided by the cauldron will be a straight primary stat boost, so that's probably going to be a good general potion for most players, but it looks like we will have to source and bring our own vials this time, so no more guild flasks in Dragonflight. Besides that, and obviously the wide variety of potions and vials, the only really interesting thing left for Alchemy and Dragonflight are the Alchemist Stone Trinkets. We have two trinkets to look at. One is a haste trinket that decreases the cooldown of your combat potions by 1 minute, letting you use potions more often, and Potions of Power will also grant you additional primary stat. And the other trinket is a versatility trinket that has a chance to grant you a huge amount of primary stat, depending on what your class is, and extend the duration of your active vial by 1 minute. So not only do these trinkets provide you with a potentially very strong bonus baseline, they also directly interact with your potion use or vial use, which is a really cool touch for an alchemist and could end up being very powerful. That's kind of it, so let's move on to the blacksmiths. Blacksmiths are going to be the weapon pros in Dragonflight, as well as the plate armor crafters, as you might expect. They can make a lot of profession tools, which will be important for anyone looking into professions, and they also have some weapon enhancements like sharpening stones. But the really interesting part for blacksmiths comes with repair hammers. You can make hammers to repair your own gear. They do require blacksmithing, sadly, so you can't pass them on to a friend. I think that's a bit boring. I would like to see the lower tier of repair hammer tradable and usable by anyone at the very least, but then we also have a special master's hammer. This looks to be a reusable repair hammer, and learning the recipe does take quite a lot of specialization points for blacksmithing, so it's kind of a long-term goal, but that does mean that blacksmiths will be able to repair their gear for free whenever they want for the entire expansion. That's pretty neat. That's really the only interesting part for blacksmiths, sadly, though I do expect their weaponsmithing will make them very valuable all throughout Dragonflight. Enchanting is up next, and I'll be honest, I'm kind of surprised. There isn't that much going on with Enchanting for Dragonflight. We have a lot of enchants, and some of them are interesting and potentially powerful, but we've kind of come to expect that from Enchanting. That's kind of what they do. Nevertheless, in Dragonflight we have enchants for cloaks, chests, braces, boots, rings, and weapons, so everyone will have their list of best enchants for each of those slots, no doubt. Now, something that is slightly interesting is the ability to enchant profession tools. Absolutely everyone is going to want one of these enchants, whether it's for the crafting tools or the gathering tools, and you're going to want an enchant for each tool, so this is definitely something worth remembering if you go the enchanting route or if you want to min-max your profession stats. The only other curious thing enchanters have is the crystal magical lockpick. I thought this was just going to be another lockpick option, but it specifically reads that you can unlock magic bound chests to access the treasure within. I'm not too sure what a magic bound chest is. I haven't come across any in my beta adventures, so I'm not sure how valuable this is going to be, but if normal lockpicks or even rogues can't get into these chests normally, then you'll probably need this crystal magical lockpick instead. Moving on, we come to engineering. I'm just going to go ahead and spoil this one. Of course, it's the engineers that get the most cool stuff. The first interesting things are the goggles. This is also pretty standard, but this time the goggles only have one secondary stat, and they come with a tinker socket. The single secondary stat is interesting, and it's going to be great for anyone who loves to stack a specific stat, but the tinker slot is where I want to focus. You can put very specific tinker modules into these sockets. As you might have guessed, we have lots of tinker modules to craft and create as well. Some are effects that we've seen before, like battle res, invisibility, a flamethrower, but there are also charge effects, or roots and knockbacks, alarm turrets, and even one that guarantees a tinker to actually work, so you can put whichever one you want into your goggles and go crazy with it. But then you can also make braces as an engineer. There are braces for each armor type, and they once again only have one secondary stat and a tinker socket, but the goggles are strictly engineers only. You need to be an engineer to use them. The braces are not. So you can use the work order system to have an engineer craft these braces for you, even though they are bind on pickup, and you can use a tinker socket without actually being an engineer. This is going to be very interesting because some of these tinkers will be very useful and potentially very powerful, so being able to use them while not having to commit to being an engineer could shake things up quite a bit. But this also means that engineers get to use 2 tinker modules instead of just 1. In addition to the tinkers, engineers also have lots of devices they can make. There are quite a few fun ones like toys and cosmetic stuff, but there are a few I want to highlight. Obviously, they get a new wormhole generator that lets you zip around the Dragon Isles, probably not quite as useful in a world with dragon riding, but still probably fun nonetheless. They can also make saviors. This is essentially just a new wipe protection pylon that should prove to be quite useful in various forms of content where you want to recover from a wipe quickly. Then there's also the Zap Throttle Soul Inhaler. This one is really interesting because I haven't really seen anything about it. It's like it's snuck under the radar, but by the sounds of things you can suck souls out of elementals. These souls are actually epic crafting materials, so they're probably going to be quite rare, valuable, hard to get, and required for the highest tiers of crafting. If this Soul Inhaler is the only way to get them, well, that's going to be an incredibly valuable device. Interestingly, the device itself is not enough. You also need an empty soul jar. We will see where that comes from in just a little bit. Everyone is going to want one of these gizmos, which makes any engineer who can make it a very valuable friend. There is also the help device. This one is specifically for battlegrounds, and it essentially lets you fire off a flare to signal a base needs help or enemies are approaching. I think this is a really cool idea, and I can't wait to see everyone fire them off randomly, making the item completely useless. And then engineers can also make portable alchemist and tinker profession tables. If you didn't know already, a lot of crafts will require you to be at a profession table. They are scattered throughout the Dragon Isles, but there's a nice collection of them in the Player City hub of Valdrakken. Basically, you need to be at your table to use your profession properly, but engineers can temporarily provide a table for both alchemists and engineers to make what they want wherever they want, so that's going to be very useful indeed. Besides that, they also have lots of bombs to make, as you would expect from our friendly neighborhood engineers. Now, as for Inscription, there are a few things changing here. To start with, missives will return, but they're going to be a bit different. They still allow you to choose your secondary stats for various crafts, but this time they will increase recipe difficulty, which leans into the quality system quite heavily. The cool thing is that the higher the quality of your missives, the less it will increase the recipe difficulty, so there's still value in creating higher quality missives. Another interesting addition here is that you can create missives for profession tools specifically with the new profession stats. So that's going to be huge for the professions that maybe want very specific stats, or maybe different profession tools with different stat setups for different kinds of crafts. I do think that's going to be a thing, so these missives are going to help with that. We also get a new round of Dark Moon cards and decks, which we all know will most likely be very powerful at the start of an expansion. I'm pretty sure they're made in more or less the same way. Create random cards, put them all together, and make a deck for yourself. But something that is different is that scribes can create something called a Dark Moon deck box. These are the same thing as the deck, but a higher item level, and because it's a craft, you can also increase the item level using Empower materials, which means you should be able to upgrade a Dark Moon deck up to the Mythic Raid quality, which will keep them relevant for much longer, especially if you have powerful effects. Do note that a deck is actually required for a box craft that's in the recipe, so you won't be able to make the box if you don't already have a deck. But another factor for these Dark Moon deck boxes is that you can add a sigil to your box. That's also an optional crafting reagent here. These change how the shuffle mechanic works, and there are quite a few options. You can remove numbers, force it to stay on the ace, or even give you more control over how and when the deck shuffles. It's quite interesting and could make these decks even more powerful than they usually are, simply because you remove or restrict the RNG factor of the deck's effects. Another huge option for Inscription is the ability to create profession knowledge books. You can craft a book for each profession, and when used it will grant 1 knowledge. These are also going to be tradable and sellable on the auction house, so everyone can use them even if you're not a scribe. Knowledge is going to be huge for professions. It's literally the main grind for profession progression, and it's what will allow you to specialize and improve your crafts. Everyone will be chasing after every last point of knowledge they can get their hands on. These books only provide 1 knowledge and it can be used only once per week, but that means everyone interested in professions will be buying at least one of these books per profession they are invested in every single week for a very long time. They're going to be very valuable and only scribes can make them. And then as an extra little bonus, Inscription also has a few recipes for crafting dragon riding customization options, something that a lot of players will probably want to collect, so that could be another great gold making option for all the scribes out there. Next up is Jewelcrafting, and they actually do have some interesting items this time around. To start with, that empty soul cage from the engineering thing we talked about, that's going to come from Jewelcrafters. I guess part of the fantasy this time around for Jewelcrafting is also glasswork, so you can make empty soul cages. One would assume that you cannot trap a soul if you don't have an empty cage, so you'll need a soul inhaler and an empty cage, and then you can decide what to do with your souls after. You can use them in crafts or break them down into awakened reagents. That's pretty cool. There's another extra little useful thing. Jewelcrafters can also make vials for alchemists. Now you might think that a bit silly, but this is actually where the quality factor of items comes into play. You can probably only buy bog standard lowest quality vials from vendors in game. If you want the higher tiers of vials to help create higher tiers of potions and phials, it looks like you'll be turning to the Jewelcrafters. Now one of the more interesting items for Jewelcrafters is the tiered medallion setting. This item allows you to add a socket to your neck piece, and it also says a neck can have up to 3 sockets, so you can use this medallion to crank up your sockets with a restriction. The number of sockets you can add is directly linked to the quality of your medallions, so you need to be able to craft a quality 3 medallion to add that 3rd socket, which means Jewelcrafters who focus their specialization into making better medallions will be the first to make these 3 socket medallions, and these are tradable, so this will be huge for gold making early on. In addition to that, there are some pieces of jewelry, necklaces included, that have special effects tied to them, which means you can probably make a very good necklace for yourself and then slap 3 sockets on it for maximum effectiveness and socket them with the best gems you can create. These effects also interact with your socketed gems, so you can amplify their effects or use them for a quick shield. It's a pretty cool idea, and I hope we get more effects as Dragonflight unfolds. It's not just jewelry though, there are also some trinkets that directly interact with your socketed gems. Each trinket provides you with a secondary stat dependent on which types of gems you have equipped, so this encourages you to stack as many gems of the same type as possible, which lends even more weight to the medallion because you can then stack 3 sockets on your neck, and if you craft 2 rings for yourself, that's another guaranteed 2 sockets. So you can start with 5 sockets almost baseline as a jewel crafter, providing you can craft all the right stuff. That's an insane amount of secondary stats if you stack your gems properly. And then on a cute little note here, jewel crafters also get to make a full set of jeweled whelplings. I usually wouldn't include pets, quite a few other professions do have some pets that they can make, but jewel crafters get one for each Dragonflight, which is really neat in my opinion. Leatherworkers will be making both leather and mail gear as per usual, which means they're arguably making gear for the most classes total. That already sets them ahead, but sadly that's kind of all they have going for them. They do have quite a variety of gear options. They're going to be focusing on various elemental powers to craft gear with special bonuses, but that's not what we're here to talk about. The only thing that's slightly interesting is the return of leg enhancement effects. Leatherworkers can craft new armor kits that increase your armor as well as your agility and strength, and these can be put onto your leg pieces of gear. There are 3 tiers of armor kits, and these kits also have quality tied to them, so the better you can craft them, the higher the stat increases will be. That's kind of it though, the rest is just focused on creating awesome gear. And then last but not least, we come to tailoring. Like the other armor crafting professions, they don't seem to have too many other exciting factors to look into, into. They're going to have a variety of cloth armor recipes to chase after and perfect, and that makes up the majority of the profession. You will see the return of spell threads in Dragonflight. These will serve as leg enhancements for casters by the looks of things. They increase intellect and stamina, or intellect and mana, and then there's a cheaper variant which only increases int by a smaller amount. The other interesting thing available to tailors are the new reagent bag crafts. The reagent bag, or profession bag, is tied to the brand new bag slot that we have in Dragonflight. You can only put a profession bag in that slot, and that bag will hold all of your profession items and materials. Well, until it fills up anyway. This gives us more bag space in general and helps to keep our actual bag space free for non-profession related items. So we're obviously all going to want as big a bag as we can get our hands on, and that's where tailors come in. They can craft 32 and 34 slot reagent bags, but hopefully larger bag recipes will be available later on. So there's a lot of potential here outside of what you would typically expect for a profession, and I'm excited to see how this all comes together. Almost everyone has something that could end up being very useful, and for the few that don't have too many exciting things, they already have some of the most extensive and valuable base profession recipes anyway. Being able to craft gear on par with mythic raid gear is going to be huge for tailoring, leatherworking and blacksmithing, and they also have a lot of profession tools between them. So while they might not get the fun stuff, they will still be great professions going forward. But those are the most interesting and most powerful profession items you might want to keep an eye on for Dragonflight. Which items do you think will end up being used the most or most sought after? Were you hoping to see anything else added to professions that wasn't here? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and to everyone subscribed on Twitch. You can see the names floating by on screen. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss another video. Thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I'll see you next time.